Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever in the world you are. Today, I would like to follow up on a video that has been taking the rounds in my WhatsApp group, social media. Is by Taffy. Many people have seen some of his videos. He's a social commentator and musician. Um, and I think it's worth listening to what he has to say. And I can follow it up and give you my personal take on what he's saying. Let's listen to this.
Was advocate parties in number structures are you win my elections. So therefore it's advantage to Zanu PF. Sekasiana ikana Nelson Chamisa anabasa huyu. Chamisa the clueless leader and only the clueless party. Why are you on Chamisa's case? Say you just spend the time talking about a clueless person. Munasna plan. Okay, Zanu PF. Okay. Are you winning my elections? So therefore it's advantage to Zanu PF. Sekasiana ikana Nelson Chamisa anabasa huyu. Chamisa the clueless leader and only the clueless party. Why are you on Chamisa's case? Say you just spend the time talking about a clueless person. Munasna plan. Okay, Zanu PF. Okay. Celebrate Taika in Taiba Stadium Bianyanda. Munoshika mufugama muteketera. Oromotira pasi mufadha vari pasi mufadha chero ma-ancestors. Yeah. Why? Muchicelebrata muchiteketera so kuti ambuya nehanda nyakasikana ndisu mapfupa enyu aya makati achazopfuka. Tinoda kukutenda yambuya tiri kupinda muelection neparty against party isina mastructure. Tatochiwina chinhu ichi. Why are you not celebrating Zanu PF? Chamisa is not the only opposition leader. Vakawanda. Munzora ariko your darling Munzora. Wamakati is the model of what an opposition leader should be like. The darling Munzora. Anima structures and the party akarongeka. Party anima structures. Munodi spend the time muchitaura nezvamunzura. Party Munzora anima structures kaime. That means it should win the elections. Party Munzora anima structure. Ya Chamisa inama structures. Ya Munzora inama structures. So that means party Munzora is a threat to Zanu PF. How come muskutaura any party iri a threat to you? MDC ya Munzora because inama structures. Ya Chamisa is not a threat to you inama structures. Simple logic. Is nothing when I regret tools and put out. Simple logic, very, very simple, elementary stuff. There's a crash, and put out. There's a crash. Monzora, any party in my structures. Therefore, Monzora is a threat to Zanu PF. Same Musinga Tauri Nezake, Mukitaura Neza Chamisa, clueless guy, are only that clueless party. Ana Blanca Chamisa. Why are you stressing about Nelson Chamisa in the Triple C? Muno Banirei Marali, a Triple C. Why? Answer the question. You know the answer to the question. The answer is Chamisa is the only game in town. Hate it or love it. Chamisa is the only serious opposition leader. Hate it or love it. The Triple C is the only serious opposition party in Zimbabwe. Hate it or love it. Ikoko kumloka, kumpiringisha, kumisa mbira dzakondo, kumisa urimbo, kumtrepa, kumcontainer kwa makamita ikoko. Ndio kunoratidza threat yake. Izvozvo hazviitwe munhu asina basa. Izvozvo hazviitwe pungu. Izvozvo. You are simply letting everyone know that this is the only game in town. You know it, I know it, we know it. At Sukuti Chamisa are perfect. Don't get me wrong. Chamisa makes mistakes. Chamisa has weaknesses. There are no such things as saints in politics. We know this. No one is perfect. No one. So it doesn't have to be perfect. The thing is, your good side should outweigh your bad side. Kana watongodaro chete watova good candidate for a leader when your good side outweighs your bad side. Otherwise, munhu wese ane good side, munhu wese ane bad side. Chatingatongovhunza ndechekuti nderipi side hombe, good side kana kuti bad side? Chii chinonyodominata ma-weaknesses ako kana kuti ma-strengths ako? Ndo chega chatingatovhunza, otherwise munhu wese ane ma-weaknesses. And this is the very thing chinoita kuti some of us titi it does not have my vote. Why? Because listen, hatisi kuti hapana kana chine musoro chaitwa na-it. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of good things that it has done kuva zvaakaita president. There are a lot of good things that Zanu PF has done kuva zvatakawana independence muna 1980. The only problem is the bad things that it has done far outweigh the good things that it does. It's like taking 3 steps forward and a million steps back. So therefore you are basically literally moving in reverse. Hausi kutomboenda mberi. 3 steps forward, 99 steps back. You're not going forward, you are literally moving in reverse. Uri kudzokera kumashure.
I'd like to leave it at that. I think the basic argument he's making there is a valid argument. We have got to look at balancing what a good leader should be. Their good deeds should outweigh their bad deeds. That's simple enough. What is interesting about this video, and those who support Triple C, is their failure to realize that ever since MDC Triple C's formation, they have failed. The people of Zimbabwe have risked life and limb to vote MDC/Triple C leaders into power these last 23 years for the principal primary purpose of that they will implement the democratic reforms necessary to end the Zanu PF dictatorship. That is the most important task that the people have been expecting from MDC. And 23 years down the line, including 5 of which in the GNU, not even one meaningful reform has been implemented. Not one. Worse still, ever since the 2008 to 2013 GNU, MDC have been participating in these flawed and illegal elections, knowing fully well that participating will only give Zanu PF legitimacy. Knowing fully well that Zanu PF was rigging the elections. And their excuse for participating is that they also knew that Zanu PF was offering a number of gravy train seats for those willing to participate. In fact, that is the reason why MDC failed to implement even one meaningful reform during the GNU. Now, I would like to hear TAF or any of the other Triple C supporters out there come up with even one good deed that the Triple C have done or MDC have done in the last 23 years to outweigh their betrayal on reforms and their continued participating in flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy. So there's no point in saying, oh, a good leader, we should judge him. Their good deeds should outweigh their bad ones. And then you fail to name even one good deed that Triple C have done. This is the irrationality of the MDC supporters. The main problem with some of these MDC supporters, including our friend here, is that they see the contest in a binary way. They only see Zanu PF and Triple C. They look at which one of the two is better than the other. So they are not weighing the good deeds of the individual against their bad deeds. They are comparing the good deeds of one and the good deeds of the other, the bad deeds of one and the bad deeds of the other, and saying which one of the two is worse. People have not considered the competence of Triple C. They've only looked at the disaster that Zanu PF has delivered. When you tend to look at in that binary mentality, this is why you end up in the situation we were in 2017, for instance, when the two comparisons was Robert Mugabe and Mnangagwa after the military coup. Robert Mugabe was the dictator. He had been the dictator and had led the country the last 37 years. And therefore, then Mnangagwa, in comparison, was much better. And so, after the military coup, the people came out onto the street to support the military coup and applaud what the military coup had done. Removing Mugabe became the focus, not knowing that we are only replacing one dictator with another. It is not so much the dictator, it is the dictator, it's the system. So, in other ways, in the present setup, we should not be looking at Triple C versus Zanu PF. The system has failed to produce competent leaders, whether they be in Triple C or in Zanu PF. So what we need to change is the system. To accept that the system has failed to produce competent leaders. I agree totally with that Mnangagwa's good deeds are far outweighed by his bad deeds. I mean, the country is in a serious economic meltdown. There is no freedom of expression. The people are being denied their fundamental rights. None of the good things that he has done could outweigh the bad things that he has done. But by the same token, none of the bad things that Triple C and MDC have done could be outweighed by the good things they have done. I can't see anyone who can convince me would MDC have done anything in the last 23 years that could outweigh their betrayal of the people on reforms and now participating in these flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy. Whether we like it or not, Triple C is participating in these elections for the sake of the few seats that they are going to be given as the Zanu PF is giving away to entice the opposition to participate. That is selling out. This is why we have got to look at it in a broader way. And none of this binary mentality. Both sides have got nothing to offer. Triple C have got nothing to offer for the nation going forward. Zanu PF got even worse. We need to change the system and not just pick between the two bad. This is why we need to focus on implementing the democratic reforms which would allow our democratic institutions like ZEC, the police, to act in a way that will deliver free, fair, and credible elections. Once you've created that environment, I believe the political parties themselves would be forced to have quality leaders. There will be more democratic competition within the party itself to allow competent leaders from each party to emerge, be it Zanu PF reformed or be it Triple C reformed. At the present moment, the system that is there does not allow quality leaders, be that in Zanu PF or in Triple C, to emerge. The system itself is forcing mediocre leaders to emerge. There is nothing to be celebrated about Triple C having no structures. Of course, they don't have any structures. Any quality opposition or political party, be it opposition or in power, would have structures, would have a constitution, not just be blundering along. The reason why some people continue to support Triple C, regardless of this, is out of desperation. They have looked at Zanu PF and they've said anything, as long as it's not Zanu PF, must be better. And that is a trap in which we must get out of. We must look at what are we putting in its place, even if we were to vote Zanu PF out. And not look at just, let's get Zanu PF out. And then afterwards we can look at who did we put in. No, we should also look at who are we putting in. If the person we are putting in has absolutely done nothing of substance in the last 23 years since they've been on the political stage, then we should not put them in. I challenge anybody out there to name anything of substance that Triple C or MDC has achieved in the last 23 years, including 5 in the GNU, that could outweigh their failure to implement even one meaningful democratic reform, that could outweigh their continued participating in flawed elections, even when everyone is saying you cannot participate in these elections. They're so flawed. You don't even have a verified voters roll. And yet here we are. We all know that it doesn't matter how flawed the process gets. Triple C will participate in these elections regardless, because they are after the few seats Zanu PF is offering to entice them to participate. That is the only reason why they keep on participating. I think we need to get out of that mentality of only seeing right or wrong, Triple C or Zanu PF, black or white. That is monochrome. A human being has got the intellect to see the colors of the rainbow. And yet we put blinkers on so that we only see black or white. That is the reason why we are not getting out of this mess. In 2017, we had the opportunity to say the military coup, will it get us out of this mess we are in? And the answer was no, it will not. The military coup was only going to change the dictator and a few people around the dictator, only to replace him with another dictator. So we should have rejected it. But because of our blinkered mentality of saying, who is better, Robert Mugabe or Mnangagwa? Mugabe had been the figurehead of the dictatorship for the 37 years. And therefore, then we could say, oh, he has done a lot of bad things. Mnangagwa may have been his henchman, the one who was responsible for carrying out some of the atrocities on behalf of Mugabe, including the Kukura Hundi, including the coup of the 2008 elections. But those he was doing on behalf of Mugabe, and therefore then they were all attributed to Mugabe, and that made him better than Mugabe. And therefore, in 2017, we thought we had a choice between Mugabe or Mnangagwa, and we went for Mnangagwa. When the real choice was to end the dictatorship so that we have a democratic system of government. That was the real choice. And we chose to maintain the dictatorship as long as we change the dictator. This election is about changing the political system that has failed the nation, that has failed to produce quality leaders, be that in Zanu PF or in the opposition. We cannot deny that there is no quality leaders in Zanu PF, nor can we deny that there are no quality leaders in the opposition. So to confine ourselves to the narrow, blinkered view of thinking that our choice is between Zanu and Triple C, Mnangagwa or Chamisa, is to miss the point completely. That is not the choice. Both of them, we can reject them and say, no, we want to change the system. This is a system that has failed to produce quality leaders. Like Taff correctly pointed out, if your good deeds outweigh your bad ones, then you're a good leader. But he was talking of Chamisa is the only game in town. And yet he cannot name the good deeds that Chamisa has done to outweigh the bad things that he has done these last 23 years. There is nothing that Triple C and MDC have achieved that could possibly outweigh the fact that they betrayed the nation in terms of failing to implement the democratic reforms. And let's not forget here, MDC stands for Movement for Democratic Change. And people voted for them on the basis that they are the Movement for Democratic Change. They are the party that is going to bring about the democratic change. And 23 years later, ask anyone to name one democratic change that they brought about. None. You can't name one because there is none. They had the opportunity to implement reforms, the golden opportunity during the GNU, and they failed to implement even one meaningful reform. Even Zanu PF cronies themselves were boasting when they were asked, why is MDC failing to implement even one meaningful reform during the GNU? Those cronies boasted and said, well, MDC leaders have learned to enjoy the good life, the, the gravy train good life. They will not rock the boat. They will not implement any reforms. And that is exactly what happened. And so to keep on pretending that the same MDC leaders are now the panacea to the country's problem is, to say the least, incredibly naive. And that is the kind of naivety that will lock us into this situation where we keep repeating the same mistake over and over again. These coming 2023 elections is not going to deliver any meaningful change because none of the two parties have got any quality in them. None of the two parties can say, yes, we've done these good things, and that outweighs the bad things we did. So none of them have got good leaders. The logical thing would be, well, let's change the system so that it can allow quality leaders finally to emerge. That should be our objective, not to keep on repeating the same mistakes. People are ignoring what Triple C have failed to do in 23 years because they're so desperate about getting rid of Zanu PF. That is not thinking in a rational way. Yes, desperation, some people do desperate things under those conditions. But that is the time when you really need to put on your thinking cap and think in a more rational way. We do not want, after 45 years of rigged elections, we do not want to participate in these elections only to give ZANU PF legitimacy. Because once you have participated, you cannot turn around and say, oh, the process was rigged. You knew the process was flawed. You knew the process was illegitimate. And you still participated because you knew, you thought you would still win. Like what our friend Chamisa and his friends keep saying, they can win rigged elections. ZANU PF rigged elections? We saw what ZANU PF can do in 2008. We know with 20, even with 73% of the cast voting in the March election that year, Tsvangirai still failed to win, to get the keys to State House. That's how powerful the ZANU PF rigging machinery has become. Recently, we have been watching this Al Jazeera gold mafia. What is the biggest story it's sending out is that Mnangagwa is incredibly rich from the looting. Hubert Angel was saying Mnangagwa has got a war chest from his own sources of 240 million US dollars to bankroll these elections. All the opposition parties put together, they will be very lucky if they can raise among them, the lot of them, 1 million US dollars. Yet Mnangagwa alone has got 240 million. Of course, some of the beneficiaries from the system will contribute. And I believe that ZANU PF for this election will probably have 1.5 billion US dollars to spend, all for the single purpose of making sure that Mnangagwa wins the presidency and ZANU PF wins majority in parliament and in the Senate. All the country's resources are now focused on keeping ZANU PF in power and not for the good of the nation. And once you have participated, you cannot turn around and say, oh, the election was flawed. You knew the election was flawed. And this is the time when we should say, no, we are not going to participate in a flawed election process. This mentality of saying, no, Chamisa is the only game in town. Game in town, is he going to win it? That is what matters here. If he's the only game in town and he participates and he loses, you cannot turn around and say the elections were rigged, because he knew the elections were being rigged. That is the argument. You cannot participate in a flawed electoral process knowing that it is flawed. And then when the results come, complain that it was flawed. No, you cannot do that. In Shona, I've got a saying that You knew the system was flawed, correct it. Say, no, no, we are not going to participate until we correct these things. MDC has failed to implement any democratic changes, any changes that would have corrected the flaws in the system. They did not. And yet they keep on participating. They cannot complain then afterwards that the election is flawed, that they were cheated. So if our friend Taff here is advocating that Chamisa and his Triple C are the only game in town and they are going to win the election, that's well and good. They better win the elections then. Because if they lose, they cannot turn around and say the election was flawed. They must have solutions on how to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. Like what Chamisa has been saying, we have got strategies on winning rigged elections. Those strategies better work because if they fail, you cannot turn around and say the election were rigged. That is the argument. We have seen this happen before. In 2018, MDC Alliance claimed that they were going to win those elections because uh, they've got measures to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. But we also know that those measures did not work. And Zanu PF went on to win those elections. And then they started complaining that the elections were rigged. It's too late. The international community ignored Chamisa and company completely because they'd been saying that all along that the elections are flawed and they were ignored. We cannot keep on repeating the same mistake. And we cannot keep on trying to convince our citizens out there that this is what the elections should be about. No, elections should be free, fair, and credible. No one should have to be frog marched to go and vote for a particular candidate. We should have a voters' roll that should be open for everybody to inspect. That should be we should be able to verify it before we go to the voting. We should not have a situation where Zanu PF is able to cherry pick 3 million Zimbabweans in the diaspora have been denied the vote in this coming election 2023 for no better reason other than Zanu PF knows the majority of those people in the diaspora are there either as economic refugees or political refugees or both. And therefore they are not likely to vote for Zanu PF. And since Zanu PF cannot threaten them as readily as it threatens Zimbabweans back in Zimbabwe, and it's not does not have the opportunity to rig that vote, the only best thing the party could do is to deny those people the vote. The argument that we are not going to grant the people in the diaspora the vote until the West lift the sanctions imposed on the regime is the most nonsensical argument you can think of. Those 3 million Zimbabweans in the diaspora, what have they got to do with the West and the sanctions imposed on the regime? Why should they be denied their fundamental right just because Zanu PF and the West have fallen out? A man does not go home and start beating his wife and children just because he had a quarrel with his neighbor or his boss at work. What if the wife and the children got to do with it? We are going into these elections knowing the process is flawed and illegal. The only logical thing to do now is to say, no, this process is flawed and we should not participate in it. These people who keep on talking of Triple C is the only game in town and encouraging people to participate in it are misleading people. Because as long as Zanu PF is able to rig the elections, once you've participated, you cannot then pretend that you can somehow uh, denounce the process as being illegal and deny Zanu PF legitimacy. No. By participating, you are giving the process some modicum of credibility, and therefore then you are giving the results some modicum of political legitimacy. After 45, nearly, 43 years of rigged elections, Zanu PF rigged elections, I think we need to sort out this problem. We cannot keep on repeating it. We cannot keep on pretending that we can win rigged elections. We want clean elections. And if we want clean elections, we have got to make that demand for clean elections outside before we participate, and not participate and then pretend we can somehow recall the whole process once we have lost the elections. Are we participating in these elections because we can win rigged elections? Because that is what Triple C are telling us. And that's what they're saying, then they better win the rigged elections. Because complaining that the elections were rigged is not going to wash. And frankly, I think we've participated enough to know that you can never win elections that are so flawed, it is literally impossible. I mean, on the economic side of it, from the Al Jazeera documentary, Zanu PF, like I said, is likely to raise 1.5 billion US dollars to bankroll its election process. And the opposition will be lucky to raise 0.1% of that, 1.5 million. They'll be lucky. How can that be a fair process when one has got so much money and the other one has got nothing? We cannot keep on participating in these flawed elections and pretend that we can win them. That is the argument. And that is what people should focus their minds on. It is one thing to say a good leader's good deeds should be outweighed by their bad deeds. Name the good deeds of Chamisa and name the bad deeds of Chamisa. And let's outweigh them. Let's weigh the two. At the present moment, I can tell you that failing to implement even one meaningful democratic reform in 23 years, 5 of which in the GNU, and then insisting in participating in flawed elections, is one of the worst things that the opposition have done. And I would like to hear any good thing that the opposition are doing or have done to outweigh that. You set the standard, let's weigh it. Don't keep on only focusing on Zanu PF before you have considered the bad things that Triple C have done and the good things that they have done. You immediately think the comparison is between Chamisa and Mnangagwa. Forget Mnangagwa. Just as much as in 2017, it was not a question of just focusing on Mugabe and comparing the two. Forget Mugabe. Focus on Mnangagwa. What good thing has he done? Nothing. So why would you think a coup in which Mnangagwa takes over is going to be good for the country? That immediately would have raised the flag and say, no, we don't want this. If we're going to remove a dictator only to replace him with another. This is a meaningless cycle. We don't want that. And now we are being given the same idiotic choice between one corrupt and incompetent tyrant, Mnangagwa, and a corrupt and equally useless Nelson Chamisa. And we think the two is the choice that we've got to make. No, that is not the choice we've got to make. Let's change the system, implement the democratic reforms, and end the dictatorship, the autocracy that has failed to produce quality leaders, be that in the ruling party or the opposition. That is what we should be focused on. These elections, people should not participate in them because they are flawed. They will never produce any meaningful change. That is what we should be focused on. Food for thought. Thank you very much and good day.